So every road team thus far has come out and stole game one in the second round. Sunday afternoon, the Indiana Pacers show up in Cleveland. And look, I know they're missing Darius Garland, obviously a key cog to what they do. They still look soft to me in that front line of Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. I know they've tried to shake that label, but the Pacers are a tougher team, a deeper team, and they've got a Hall of Fame coach. So I expect that series to be back and forth brutal and go 7 games. That's going to be a really good series. And then yesterday evening, privileged Tobias Harris and Jaylen Brown go a combined 14 of 43. Jalen's limping around. All of a sudden, Porzingis is out of the lineup again, and the champs are leaking oil. They're leaking oil. And this New York Knicks team, where I think everyone is waiting for them to run out of gas, thanks to Tibbs and their playing style. The one thing that I'll say about Brunson Ball is he has the ball so much and he controls the pace so well that maybe the minutes aren't as daunting as they look on paper. Albeit Bridges, OG, they play so hard. They're going to run out of gas. Whether it happens in the second round, Boston better hope so. Because Brunson, it's incredible what he continues to just. I'm not a fan of it aesthetically, but that series is probably going to be tougher than Boston had hoped for, especially if they're not healthy. And then AG baby, 2 game winners in 2 rounds of the playoffs. And what struck me last night, first of all, I like angry Joker. He was finna turn into Heath Ledger Joker, right? Like at some point here, it feels like Jokic is going to snap in this series. And he's very irritable and just fiery. And it's fun to watch a guy that good ratchet it up even more. But what stuck out to me, obviously, you can point to Chet missing those 2 free throws late and Dagnall fouling too early, which was very clear, right? It was like, oh, okay. Because usually you always hear a coach say like under 10 seconds. It was before that, right? But to me, Chet, not only was he kind of getting manhandled in the playoff physicality, I don't trust the shot whatsoever. And I spoke about it, I believe it was last year. Was he out all of last year? The last time we saw him in the playoffs, I believe it was last year. You know, he's got like an 8-foot wingspan. And so the ball just gets out too far in front of him. He doesn't pocket the ball in enough. And so it's super flat. It's super flat, particularly from 3. He missed a couple big ones down the stretch. And then he iced himself at the foul line. He absolutely Giannis'd himself at the foul line there. And then it was funny, though, to hear AG was in shock when they interviewed him after, and he was trying to compliment Russ without dissing Russ. He was like, Russ, a lot of the time, the open man is you go back and look at that interview and you can see AG trying to kind of like bob and weave and shout out Russ without saying he did. I was surprised he passed me the ball, right? Because Russ gets that outlet after the 2 missed free throws and everybody thought it was head down to the rim. He kicks it to AG. And what's important about that make is, look, he's not thought of as a 3-point shooter, right? We all know that, even though he is career high. I think he's at 40% this year. He's really worked on his feet. His foot replaced on the catch. But a lot of the times in the scenarios where it's like you need a shot, it's a game-winning shot, it's a clutch shot, it can't be necessarily the one you would typically take. It's the one that you're in rhythm. Like if he would have put it down or tried to do something, who knows what would have happened? He gone to the line, right? But he caught it in rhythm open, so that's the one you take, and that's the one he makes. Before we talk about this Wolves series, Underdog, they're running a ton of specials right now. We've got the extender, right? And the longer the series goes on, the bigger the boosts. You've also got the ladder, which offers varying payouts specific to the stat benchmarks of 3+ players. And so there's all these boosts and all these ways to take advantage and multiply your winnings. Underdog, it's the best place to play and have picks with playoff basketball here. So you can use the link in the description. If you haven't signed up already, code Alchemy, and you'll get a 50% bonus on your first deposit up to 1,000 credits. All right, Warriors Wolves. Not a whole lot of time to dig into this, but I'll give you my key thoughts, with this happening so quickly here. A lot of people are looking at the season series, Warriors won 3-1. They won 3 of the 4 games. Here's the thing. It was a completely different team. One, and from both sides of things. Now, personnel-wise, the Wolves had the same players, right? But it took them half the year to figure out how they wanted to play with Randall and Dante, right? But from the Warriors side, obviously, this was pre-Jimmy Butler. And that is like the number one thing that you circle here, right? Because you say, who's going to guard Ant? Andrew Wiggins was the primary defender on Anthony Edwards in the regular season matchup. And so the other question comes is, when and how often do you blitz Anthony Edwards? He made the mistake early in the year of letting and he's just so transparent. You love him for it, but sometimes it's like, say yes, say less, young fella, right? Like, you don't want to tip your hand. But he let everybody know how much he disliked being trapped and blitzed. And everybody was like, oh, okay, cool, got you, right? And the Lakers tried to do it, but they don't have the personnel to do it, especially on the perimeter. You got Luka and Austin Reeves out there, and Hachimura is not a guy you want to. So, but I would say my guess, and again, you're going to have to change it up. You're going to have to remain dynamic. But in the first quarter and in the fourth quarter, you heavy blitz and trap Ant. He clearly doesn't like it, and it's not even that he necessarily can't beat it, but it frustrates him, right? The other thing that I would say with Anthony Edwards at this phase in his career is recognize when he's trying to take over the game, because it's very clear. It's very Kobe-esque. I don't want to sound blasphemous here yet, but there are certain stars in the league where it's very obvious. You're like, oh, they're trying to take this over right now. Final couple minutes of a quarter or whatever, you can just see the heat badge is going. And so you got to recognize that. That'd probably be a great time to blitz him or switch up the look on him. Do you start GP2 on Ant? Right? Like, that means you go small, or do you put pods on him with the understanding, like, we're just going to zone up behind him and give him a ton of help anyway in the initial? Because we've seen the Warriors, and this is very trendy in the league now, where teams are like, all right, we don't have the point of attack guy on you, so we'll sacrifice whomever on the ball and load up behind you. We've seen the Warriors use that strategy plenty, right? But to me, Quentin Post, who got played out of that Rockets series, he could destroy Rudy Gobert as far as pick and pops, transition pull-up threes where Rudy doesn't want to come out there. The problem being, and it opens up the floor, the spacing for Jimmy to operate in the paint, right? Like, offensively, it makes a ton of sense, but now you're giving Ant a target in the pick and rolls with Post. And so, no doubt you got to try him. He just got played off the series in Houston, so we'll see how that goes. My guess is Kerr, if you just look traditionally, historically, if GP2 is available, he's going to go defense, and he's going to start GP2 on Ant. That's what Kerr tends to do. And so you hope that Draymond keeps the hot hand from that Game 7 and that GP2 is willing to take and make those corner threes. But what's also interesting about the regular season matchup? Draymond, was he suspended? Did he get suspended this year? He's always on the verge, right? This was a phase in the season, because we played them a bunch of times in a row, where Kerr was doing the Moses at the 4 spot thing, where Moses was essentially playing the power forward spot in order for him to get more space and time offensively. And then he's just so naturally strong and long that it worked out it was a couple weeks there, right? And he actually somehow held up on Julius Randle pretty well. So just make note of that. Like, that worked out in the regular season matchup. But what was more intriguing was Trace Jackson had a career high 15 rebounds against this Wolves team. Again, this was a completely different Warriors roster. He had Schroeder, Gee cracked the rotation and hung around with Naz Reid a little bit, because one thing, as good as Looney was in that Game 7, and I expect to see Looney in this series, at some point they always go back to him, right? One issue he's had with this Wolves team is chasing Naz Reid off the three-point line. But again, Trace, Gee, Kuminga, when you look at the Wolves' front line, or their forwards, excluding Rudy, right? When you look at Randall, Jaden McDaniels, Naz Reid, they're more perimeter-oriented forwards. And so I think it opens up the door for more possibilities for our young forwards to get in there and see what it looks like. And we really need it. When you talk about the battery running low, the energy, the gas tank of this old team, what it's taken to get to this point, if Kerr's able to open up and play more of the young guys, it could really extend this series. I do think of Minnesota as on the lower IQ side of things, just basketball wise. You know, Ant's still young. He's figuring it out. You know, Conley is their wily vet. But when you look at Nas, you look at McDaniels, you look at Randall, and maybe you don't want to classify it as IQ, but it is, especially with fouls, right? In decision making, they tend to get over aggressive and overzealous. And so I think that will play into the hands of Jimmy and then Rudy's clumsy self, right? Where I think Jimmy will be more inclined to operate at the rim and try to draw fouls against a team that's easier to bait into fouls, right? But, Mike Conley, when he's out there, obviously you go at him and you pick on him every time he's out there. Matchup hunt, something we've done more since Jimmy has arrived in Golden State. And I think that eventually they're going to play Rudy off the floor. The Draymond Rudy thing. And I think that also what Draymond just went through in this Houston series has prepped him for staying in control with Rudy Gobert here. But for whatever reason, he's got the best of Rudy. We know that, and the Warriors have. Between Draymond and his psychological warfare and just getting under his hips and Steph pulling up on him from 30 feet, I think at some point here, Rudy will get played out of the series. But I also think Finch and Minnesota are all right with that. When you look at Nas Reed, stretch five, and Randall can bounce to the five, and they can play smaller. They've Dante, what's Shea's cousins, Nickeil Alexander, But to me, the X factor for Minnesota is Jaden McDaniels. He had a really good first round against the Lakers, and he's a very suspect. He's kind of like their GP2, only he's 6'10", right? Where it's like, is he going to take the three? Does he want to take it? Is he going to make it? Get downhill, but he's their best point of attack defender. And in that Lakers series, he didn't settle for the three. He had huge nights offensively at the rim and being very forceful downhill, understanding the Lakers don't have any rim protection. He said it himself. And so if Minnesota gets that Jaden McDaniels in this series, that's going to put them over the top, right? And so when you look at an X factor for the Warriors, there's so many options because we know we don't know what Kerr's going to do, right? He's liable to do anything in there. But I'm going to go with the sneaky one in Trayce Jackson-Davis because I think the Warriors are going to need rim protection against deterring Ant from flying in there and making posters. McDaniels, that he loves to attack from the corners in the baseline. And then not just the rim protection, the rebounding and size. He's one of the few guys physically that can match up with Julius Randle. And again, he has in a small sample size, he's played well against this Wolves team. And so I expect Trayce Jackson to crack the rotation in this matchup and perhaps be the X factor for the Warriors. But look, it could be a number of these guys, right? It could be Kuminga. It could be Gee. Again, Kerr is willing to try these things. I suspect Trayce finds his way into this rotation, but if the young guys can contribute, if Moses can refine his confidence from the three-point line, Moses is going to need to play, right? Do we see some Gee minutes rebounding, pushing the pace? If the young guys can contribute on this stage, it's going to go a long way in extending this series. But ultimately, I think the core three just probably don't have enough in the gas tank. And I know I just got done saying that in this Houston series, and they proved me wrong. Prove me wrong again, right? If Steph and Jimmy were healthy, if the thumb wasn't a thing, the tailbone wasn't a thing, and they didn't have this sprint to get to where they're at right now, I'd probably take the Warriors in 6 or 7, right? But where they sit now against this Wolves team that, hey, man, the Lakers, they always find ways to stick it to us, right? Because the Wolves cruised through the Lakers. They weren't really pressed or taxed in that first round, so they're coming off a bunch of rest. Maybe they'll have a little bit of rust in this game 1, and you can sneak up on them. But ultimately, I have the Wolves in 7. I think their size and how fresh and healthy they are at this point is going to ultimately be too much. As far as game one goes tonight, I thought some of you maybe misunderstood my point in the last Game 7 Rockets video. I'm not saying you just completely punt on this game. Again, maybe they're rusty. Maybe we jump out to the last Wolves game. I went back and looked at my Patreon breakdown, and we jumped out to like an 8-0 start. It was like 12-2. We may be able to jump out to a quick start because the Warriors are used to playoff intensity from 24 hours ago, and the Wolves have been chilling, thinking about how they whooped on the Lakers, right? I'm not saying you punt on the game. What I was saying is midway through the third quarter, they're up 15, 17 points. Now you probably consider punting with the vets and just say, all right, we'll lick our wounds and see what we can do in game two with some adjustments. But yeah, I'll be back with the Patreon breakdowns of all these games in this series, moving past that into the playoffs, Valkyrie season, NBA draft, Summer League. Support your boy. Let's go Dubs. Hit that like, share, and subscribe. I'm out, y'all.